everybody. I'm Josh Constine, venture partner at venture fund SignalFire. And today I'm here with Stani Kulechov, founder of social lending protocol Aave, and now the decentralized social networking protocol Lens. Stani, so nice to have you here. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks, Josh. Super happy to be here.
Awesome. So as I mentioned, I'm Josh. I was formerly the editor at large for TechCrunch, wrote 4,000 articles, was the #1 most cited tech journalist from 2016 to 2020. But now I'm at a venture fund called SignalFire. We invest in Web3, as well as infrastructure across software verticals. And we love helping our companies with recruiting, thanks to our recruiting engine, Beacon. And there's a real reason why we have an NPS of 92 amongst founders. So if you want to find out more about that, let me know, hit me up. But I want to jump in with you, Stani, and talk a little bit about the promise of Lens. What is this, and why is it going to change the social networking landscape?
Yeah, I mean, Lens essentially is a protocol that is running on the blockchain, and what it gives to the user is their self-identity on chain. And what it means is that, for example, today when you are using social media, you're going from one platform and you're creating your profile there and your audience and your followings. You can't actually port those followings into another application. So essentially you are creating your presence across different platforms. And what Lens protocol is achieving is that it brings the ownership of your social presence actually to you and changes the dynamics that each application can actually build an experience on top of your own social graph and giving you experience how you communicate between you and your audience. And it's on chain, meaning that we also use NFTs quite a lot in the empowerment for the users. So the profile is NFT that you can actually move along from safe custody to another addresses. And then, of course, the following relationships are NFTs as well. And all the content in Lens protocol also are collectibles as NFTs. So the users can actually monetize directly their content that they're sharing with their audience.
That's awesome. So what does the day-to-day experience of being on Lens feel like? And maybe contrast that to like a traditional social network.
I think the biggest difference is that you create your profile once. So once you have created your profile, you can actually use different applications that are built on top of the Lens protocol. So for example, traditionally you go and sign into one application, you create your profile in traditional social media, and you create your followings there and your network. In Lens protocol, actually, you do it simply once. So you have the same social graph that all these applications are leveraging at the same time and even growth hacking. And I would say that currently we see a lot of different applications being built, mainly experimentations. Developers are rebuilding applications that they see in the traditional social media and combining features that they like the most. But what it allows actually to do is it brings a lot of freedom for the user, because essentially you can get a new experience without actually losing your social graph or your presence if there is some interesting way of interacting with content in this same social graph.
I feel like the thing that I'm most excited about here is the concept of how social graph portability and the ability to really take your network and audience with you really means that the social networks or the application layers here have to treat you well, that like they can't abuse you and exploit you for your labor and content or overwhelm you with ads or violate your privacy, because they know that you can just take your profile somewhere else. You don't have to start over. And I think that lock-in has been why social networks like Facebook and Instagram and others have been able to kind of exploit their audience, because they know they're really stuck there. And so maybe tell me a little bit about what does that unlock for users and how they operate differently on this social network because they have that portability, or how does that kind of change the power dynamic between the platform and the developers and the users?
Yeah, if we compare, for example, into traditional social media, we're actually giving a lot of data for the platforms, and we're training their algorithms, we're providing content, and we're essentially supplying, we're the suppliers of the feedback loop, but at the same time, we, the users, are also the consumers in that specific feedback loop. So we are essentially giving data. Based on the data, we're able to actually, the platforms are able to know exactly what we want and sell different kinds of services. So we, the users, are the product within the platform itself. And for me, it's fascinating because with Lens Protocol, the dynamics are changing in a way that now that you actually have the freedom and the ownership of your social presence and your social graph, essentially those applications and algorithms need to work for you. And this will mean that not only the applications have to work on the experience itself and aligning towards what you actually want from the application and the algorithms itself, and finding the content that is valuable for you and being fair algorithm at the same time, and even transparent. But also the applications and the products has to be aligned with the users' values as well. Because if that particular application or experience isn't in line with the users' values that they stand for, you can always go to another experience. So it really democratizes how we use social media today. But at the same time, it actually doesn't discriminate the entrepreneurs or application builders that are focusing on building applications, because essentially it takes a lot of load out of the back end, since there's a social graph and everyone can use it as a protocol, and simply focus more towards building better algorithms that are more fair and transparent, building experiences that actually compete of the users. I would say not maybe attention, but in general how they want to interact with the content itself. And last kind of like a point is that you can actually, as a developer of social media, focus also on building more brand awareness and the visualizations that we don't see today in traditional social media. Everything we see is pretty much already kind of like very used for us.
I know for a lot of social networks that one of the big unlock moments is when you start to have these real IRL connections that come out of a social network. Like when people start to get married on your social network, you kind of know you've made it. Like, what have you seen, or what are the kind of milestones you're excited about? Maybe for like a decentralized social network, it's like, oh, they didn't form a marriage, they like formed their own country. Like, what does this look like? You know, what are the milestones that you're excited about seeing in terms of the influence of Lens on your users' real lives?
Some of the quite amazing things that we added on the protocol level is the ability to collect content. So essentially, there is this idea of user-generated content as an asset class. So today, for example, we're collecting NFTs in the form of, for example, digital art or some sort of access control. We call it token-gated NFTs. And at the same time, we're seeing more expansion towards actually being able to collect also memories that might be other content, and specifically user-generated content, which can be music, it can be also digital art, but also text-based content itself. And for us, like a lot of hero moments at the moment within the protocol is actually seeing a lot of interesting applications being built in different hackathons that we've been participating over the past months. But also seeing that some of this content are getting collected and users are setting actually collection fees as well. So we actually see direct monetization going towards the users instead of the actual platform itself. And for us, it's somehow also very groundbreaking, because it means that every user on Lens Protocol actually can monetize to whatever they express within their content publishing. And I think that's a very big, powerful moment for many of those. There isn't that many, the network is still small compared, because it's a closed beta, but we have already seen for the past couple of months, 200,000 worth of value being generated from the content that the users are sharing across the Lens protocol. And extremely interesting observation is that it's usually the peers that are collecting and the followers that are excited and friends itself. So it really puts a lot of value towards the idea that there's a creator in all of us. And I think for us, the protocol itself is quite fascinating in terms of the technicality itself, because it's very modularized. You can create different kinds of collection modules, for example, that you can use Chainlink oracles to distribute some sort of pricing data or data from off-chain, which actually can determine whether you could actually collect some particular content of a follower or even follow someone. And I think this is very valuable, because if you take a look into the like a bigger picture, we have this incredible Web3 footprint data that we're using to allow these different communities to participate or following. But there's a lot of actually data generated by the users outside of the Web3 ecosystem, and they might be newcomers into the space and might not have this wide Web3 footprint, but you need to create the equality between whoever was early in the Web3 and whoever were interacting in the off-chain ecosystem. And I think that's where oracles and Chainlink bringing the data into the Web3 and into Lens protocol could be very fascinating use case.
I really like that idea that the networks have to adapt to the users rather than the users having to adapt to the networks, which is really traditional, as well as the idea that you actually help people earn money right off the start. Very few social networks did that for, the first like 10 years of their life. So the fact that, Lens isn't even out of closed beta and you guys are already making sure that users get paid really matters. And, one thing I'm interested in is that, the first instantiation of social networks, or like the decentralization, really how that changes the core norms of a social network. Like I think of on a traditional social network, people basically make content, try to outwit the like centralized algorithm, gain attention and followers, and then maybe send traffic elsewhere to monetize it through like an e-commerce shop or subscriptions somewhere else. How do you see that kind of flow of user behavior changing or being different on Lens, where it's not that one centralized network? There's a lot more freedom to monetize. There are native monetization opportunities. How does that change the way we behave on Lens instead of something like Instagram?
Yeah, the monetization brings direct monetization brings a lot of value for the users. Maybe also like kind of like on a conceptual level, that it brings the idea that everyone can actually monetize whatever they're creating, and that can become very surprisingly. We all have value and we all have expression that actually can be collected by someone else, and it brings a lot of joy, happiness, or interesting thoughts or inspirations for many of us, and that has value. And I think like regarding like human behavior, I think, and social behavior, I really like the idea of actually making technology to reflect how we humans behave, and kind of like not modifying it to direction where we're supposed to act because of the technology itself. So I think tech can be used to actually improve human behavior, to create more net impact. But at the same time, like whatever we're building, whether it's Web2 social, on-chain social, we have to reflect how we interact socially in real life, and how our brains have been designed for centuries and ages. And I think for us, kind of like the ability to reflect, we built the protocol in a way that you can reflect the human behavior pretty much quite flexible way. So it caters a lot of the use cases in terms of like being able to connect with peers, share content, and have meaningful discussions. But in terms of like the monetization itself, I definitely agree that we've been in Web2 social focusing quite a lot on the advertising, sending traffic. But when you actually remove the barrier to enter and give the freedom, flexibility for the users to choose what is actually cool and what is useful for them, without sacrificing their whole follower base and their identity or the brand they created, we actually are able to bring more creativity. So we, the application developers as well, and communities have to figure out what could be those tools and how the monetization could work and how we bring value to the users, because it's not anymore feasible that we can actually build business models based on only referring traffic in the same way. We have to actually build value and experiences and brands and retention, like why people are coming to a particular community and why they are enjoying the experience, and also keeping the innovation curve constantly going on. So it really creates interesting dynamics, but also we will see users bringing a lot of loyalty to those builders and applications and experiences that are actually bringing them a lot of value, and that creates a lot of stickiness as well.
Yeah, I mean, like when you walk into a party in the real world, you don't go in and say, "Hey, everybody," and you just like try to like, take over the center of the room and then be like, "Hey, everybody follow me to this other place. Like come back to my house where I can sell you things." It's awkward and it would be really intrusive. And instead it feels like, hey, because you can actually earn value through the NFTs and the followings and the collections of content right on Lens, you don't have to spend half your time doing a song and dance to get people to go somewhere else, which I think is like one of the most annoying parts of being on any social network is like, yeah, they're not actually providing inherent value. They're just trying to like pull me somewhere else. And if you actually build those value accrual mechanisms into the network itself, they don't have to do that. They can just make the network better for everyone. They can actually create native content that people want to consume there. And I'm excited about that idea. And, I also think one of the big questions for you though is, does the first instantiation of a mainstream sort of scaled decentralized social network, does it look more like a decentralized profile and then all of these little decentralized social networks that are built around it? Or does it look more like a traditional social network with some decentralization aspects and then a bunch of like apps that plug in and maybe they modify the experience, but they're not like a completely different experience? Like, is it more like Twitter with a bunch of plugins, or is it more like this floating decentralized profile with whole networks built around it?
I'm a true believer in the networks model, and mainly because what I have realized during the process of building Lens Protocol is that the reason we have the centralized big platforms is mainly because we solve a lot of kind of like challenges that we had going from Web 1 and Web 2, and essentially bringing the ability to share content, interact content, and doing it in a very centralized way brings a lot of efficiency. But I think kind of like now that the platforms have grown quite big, it's very hard to actually go and compete against what they have in terms of the network effect. And I think that is fine. I think there's going to be attempts to rebuild Twitter rebuilds, and you will see a lot of Twitter clones. And I personally think they will not get that much of attraction. But what we'll be actually seeing is that now that you don't actually have to focus on building that massive network effect that we saw, for example, happening in the Clubhouse example, you can actually focus on simply creating something very valuable to a particular user group and create an interest graph out of the social graph. So essentially, those users, when you have this decentralized social media profile, are fascinated about that particular topic or interest graph, they can actually subscribe into it and that experience. So we'll see probably a lot of smaller applications, and by small it might be millions of people. It doesn't need to be billion people on the same platform. And this goes back into the Josh, your party example. For example, I might want to go party with my friends and listen to specific music, but I necessarily don't do that the same exact thing with my parents, for example. So that's a different kind of social graph, interest graph as well. And I think we will just see more new things coming up. And I think within those new things, that is where we might see a lot of traction. We might even see some of these applications becoming as massive as having billions of profiles over the long term as the blockchain itself scales. But we have a lot of opportunities in those smaller applications. So that's why I believe more about building something new and seeing kind of like those new parties coming in and how people form compared to taking completely down what already exists.
Yeah, I really like that idea. I think the concept that you get to decide what part of the network you want to use, and there's not this context collapse that you experience on traditional social networks, where your bosses and your coworkers, your friends and your family are all in the same network interacting directly, and you have this chilling effect where you like, oh, what do I say that's appropriate for all of them or interesting to all of them at the same time, and instead thinking, okay, what I can operate differently in these different these different environments, the way that we really do exhibit prismatic identity in the real world. So that brings me to one of my final question, which is really what are you excited about that's being built in the ecosystem right now, and what do you want to see built? Like, what as a request for startups, or request for applications from developers, like what do you hope people start to build on Lens?
Yeah, well, I think something that is very fascinating is we've seen a lot of very kind of like still a bit normal application being built on top of the Lens protocol, but there is actually interest usage. For example, we've seen, for example, posts in the Lens protocol where, for example, you see users actually saying that I need an answer to this particular question. If you have the right answer, post it here and set a collect fee of 1 to your 5 Matic, and I will basically collect the answer that is most valuable to me. And we start to see kind of like a very creative way of using the applications that has been built. But there's interesting things happening at the moment. For example, we saw one application where it's called the Orb, where you actually come and learn about Web3, and based on your learnings, you get more badges, and on top of that, you can share your portfolio experiences, and all this data actually, different kinds of Web3 job openings are shown to you as the user. So it's actually interesting value proposition, because there's so many things to learn in Web3 as more and more talent is coming into the space. So we see kind of like more of these micro applications that are focusing on talent onboarding and creating that social experience there. And the cool thing is that you can be actually part of that application, and that's very useful for you. But at the same time, you might be using a photo sharing application with the same exact decentralized social media profile, but the curation will be for you different. So you will not see other people's achievements and, for example, what kind of courses they made and congratulate them for that. You might only see the photo sharing aspect. So that's the beauty of decentralized social graph, that you have the protocol underneath, but then on the application level, you can actually create quite a lot and build a lot of functionality and experience.
Yeah, that's awesome. So I think everyone should be on the lookout for their opportunity to create their own Lens profile and get involved, because I feel like this is a whole other opportunity to feel early. And if you're building something in the decentralized social networking ecosystem or software infrastructure, hit me up. I'd love to hear about it at our fund SignalFire. We're $1 billion under management, and we love investing in infrastructure companies and helping them with recruiting. So please let me know if you're building something in this space. But Stani, any final word to builders and people excited about the future of decentralized social networking out there?
I would just urge anyone who is actually building and interested in this space to build something very cool and reach me out on if they have some interesting ideas, and also whoever isn't aware of the Lens protocol to read a bit more and reach out as well if they want to have an access as well. And super excited to be here today as well.
Yeah, thanks. And I'm excited for everyone to go out there and build their own version of what they want social networking to be. So for me, Josh Constine from SignalFire, and Stani from Lens, thanks so much for joining us. Talk to you next time.